Hey there, welcome back. Oh, and if you're new here, then, just plain welcome. You just thought inflation was robbing you of your money. Turns out, it wasn't your money to begin with. At least that's what the Department of Justice is trying to claim. All right, so let's understand what's going on here, because if you're like me, the first time you heard this, you're scratching your head. This makes no freaking sense. And it doesn't. But yes, the Department of Justice is actually trying to make the case that money, your money, my money, everybody's money, isn't actually property. The case that this all originates from involved a guy name was Chuck Saine, I think. Saine. I'm terrible at pronouncing names, so please forgive me. Chuck owns a lawn service in Annapolis, Maryland. Somehow he ran afoul of the Department of Labor over what was really a zoning thing. He rented an apartment for some of his employees. It wasn't zoned residential. This sounds like a local issue. Department of Labor got involved. He had a 7-year fight within the Department of Labor which wasn't even a court battle, right? There was no fighting the Department of Labor. It was fighting within the Department of Labor. The judge, the prosecutor, everybody worked for the Department of Labor, meaning this was not an impartial hearing by any stretch of the imagination. The result was he got hit to the tune of $50,000. Took the money, and then Chuck did what I think a lot of us would do. He appealed, because again, this sounds like a local zoning issue with a very mild fine and at worst a slap on the wrist, and in order to get his employees out of that apartment and move them to a residential area. He filed suit with the help of the Institute for Justice, which is a group that gets involved in a lot of lawsuits that deal with libertarian ideas. Now, it's completely unsurprising to anybody. The government, of course, wasn't going to back down. Fair enough. If they feel like they did anything right, why would they? Or they feel like they did everything right, why would they? And any time that they overstep, they will come up with some really convoluted reasons why. It's not really an overstep. It's completely within the confines of the Constitution. A lot of times, I think it's really a matter of trying to find justification after the fact, right? It's, hey, yeah, this shouldn't have happened. Under the law, this doesn't look legal. It doesn't look constitutional. But, whatever. We've got to justify it because we can't come right out and say we screwed up, because this may cause problems later. But in this case, the Department of Justice tried to justify what happened by saying that that Chuck there couldn't get any redress because they didn't take any property. In their argument, money isn't property. I'm going to quote from Reason, who had a piece on this. The DOJ gave 3 rationales for the argument, all packed into a doorstopper of a footnote. 1, the government creates money, so you can't own it. 2, the government can tax your money, so you don't own it. And 3, the Constitution allows the government to spend money for the general welfare. Well, that's fucking terrifying. All right, first of all, if it's not really property, then there's no Fifth Amendment protection via the Takings Clause to protect your money, right? If this flies, then things like civil asset forfeiture will never be overturned because, hey, money's not property, so we don't even have to go through the burden of pretending there's a trial. And they can do it to anybody because we all have money. Everything in our accounts, if the government decides they want it, they can just come and take it. And even though they can tax it, this suggests that it's theirs anyway, so they don't have to. There's nothing that says the government can't take its property back in the case of, say, something that, is the government's property. For example, schools will, give students laptops. Well, of course they can take those back. Federal employees are sometimes issued cell phones, laptops, whatever. Again, obviously they can take that back. They don't have to go through a court hearing because this is government property. This argument essentially says they can do the same thing with money. And let's look at the whole, government creates money so you can't own it. Well, the government doesn't create a lot of other things. They do sell things to the public. For example, you can buy old military vehicles, government vehicles that are being sold to the public. You can buy those. You actually own it. You get a title saying this is yours. So I find it really hard to believe that because it was the government's, supposedly, or the government creates it, you can't own it. That's a bizarre thing. And the fact is, that yes, they can tax our money, but if it's not ours, why would they even need to tax it? And yeah, the government is allowed to spend money on for the general welfare, but so what? They can take, people's homes for the general welfare. That doesn't mean it's not their property, right? I'll come back to that a little bit. But the problem, the core of the issue really is the fact that this opens up a lot of doors. But I don't think, even if this flies through the courts, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I don't think they're just going to come up and just take everybody's money. Politicians would lose their minds. First of all, they have a lot of money, and they're going to want to hold on to as much of it as they can. But what's probably more realistic is that if they can get away with doing this, they'll then apply this throughout other avenues. They'll find ways to railroad people through these kangaroo courts, find them massive amounts of money, knowing that they can just take it. They can just come through, wipe out people's bank accounts, pocket the money, and there's no recourse because it's not property. That would be just how things would start. And it would probably start pretty slowly, and then slowly, as people find new ways to apply this, become a very serious problem for abuse. Because, let's face it, the government would never fuck over the American people, would it? But one of the issues is that it's not just money that'll get applied to this. The idea of the government created it so you can't own it. If I create something, can someone else not own it? If I were to bake a cake, or I was to build a table, and I sell it to somebody or I give it to someone, is it not their property? Sure. Why is it that the government's ownership somehow implies perpetual ownership over something, whereas literally no other entity gets that? The whole thing is mind-boggling. But let's talk about how this can be applied to property. Now, as it is, I have a lot of problem with the way we deal with property, with homes and such. And part of that is the idea that you work your whole life, right? You try to, you scrimp, you save, you try to do everything right because you've been told buying a house is the American dream. It's what we all want to do with our lives, right? So you buy a house, and then you have to jump through government hoops. You have to give government money every year. You have to get permits for just about anything. And at any point, they can come up and say, for the general welfare, we're going to take your house and we're going to do something with it. And in the case of Kelo versus New London, the Supreme Court said that they could take your home, give it to a private entity, because they're going to pay a lot of taxes, and that's enough. This feels almost like we're in that same line, right? And it's, like I said, it's really terrifying. This was probably written and concocted before Donald Trump took over. I don't actually know when it was written. I don't know, where this came from. I do know it is an absolutely evil argument. The writer for Reason, a gentleman named Rob Johnson, wrote, "If a libertarian was asked to write a satire of a government lawyer's brief, this is what they might come up with. But here it was in black and white." And honestly, doesn't that really say everything you need to know? This is horrific. It's absolutely horrific. It's a terrible argument. They could have just tried to defend it as, this was a fine. They are authorized by Congress to levy fines, that the administrative court system they use is perfectly constitutional, blah, blah, blah. They could have done that. It would have still been bullshit, but they could have done it. Instead, we get this shit. I don't care how much you hate the government, you really don't hate them enough. But tell me what you think. Down in the comments, let me know what you're thinking. How do you feel about this argument? Do you feel like they might have a point, or are they just completely, out to lunch? While you're down there, hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that stuff, because this is a small channel and I need literally all the help I can get. All right, folks. So if you could give me a little love, I'd appreciate it. And on that note, I will talk to you all next time.